G'day, I wanted to talk to you about one of the projects I've been working on lately. It's a little bit unusual for me. I generally treat all of my planes in the same way. I sharpen the blades using a Veritas sharpening jig, which makes sure that the leading edge is perfectly square and straight, and that works for most of what I use my planes for. I've had this old hand plane in the back room that I've never really fixed up. It's one that was kind of a duplicate of another one that I had, and it was a lower quality plane and needed a lot more work, so I just abandoned it. But lately I had something that I wanted to try on my plane blades, and I thought I'd give it a shot on this old one before I take it onto one of my planes that I use all the time. What I wanted to do is not actually that uncommon, but it was the first time that I'd done it, which was create a slight camber on the blade itself. The reason most people do this is to make sure that when you're flattening large surfaces, you don't have the sharp lines caused by those sharp outside corners of the blades. By slightly softening them, it means you get an incredibly gentle scallop, and then you can get a more seamless, smooth finish on the work that you're, trying to flatten. What I was trying to do was actually something a little bit different, which was I wanted to put a much steeper camber on the end of the blade because I'm actually hoping to create a very slightly scalloped surface on the top of a piece that I'm working on. I've spent most of my woodworking career using chunks of big old twisted recycled timber and then getting them perfectly flat using machines, and it's a system that I'm familiar with, and it is fast for me and efficient. But there is something to be said for creating textures on the surface of your timber that are created by hand, and you can feel them and they're tactile and they catch the light in an interesting way. And for most of you who work extensively with hand tools, you'll be like, yeah, of course, that's why we do this. But for me, this is a real exploration into new forms, and what a better time to do it than right now when I have more time than usual on my hands, as I'm sure most of you guys do as well. So I'm going to take this plane apart, I'm going to treat the blade, and then see if I get the result that I'm looking for on a chunk of timber. First of all, obviously, you just need to remove the blade from the plane. The steps we're going to take are remove the blade from the plane. We're going to make sure the back of the blade is flat because that's really the first thing you need to do to any blade that you're working on. Then I'm going to go through the process of sharpening it normally, as I would to get a nice flat edge using the Veritas sharpening system. And once I have that edge, then I will start adding the camber. Because this blade was kind of neglected and messed up, I want to make sure that I've set that angle or set that bevel first using the Veritas system so that I know that the angle is set correctly before I then try to do those cambers, which inherently have to be done by hand because it is a curve that really can't be duplicated by this little sharpening jig. The sharpening system that I use generally is an Ezelap diamond plate. If the steel needs a lot of work, mine goes from 250 to 600, and that lets me really fix up pretty banged up surfaces, or if I've taken a chip out of a chisel, which happens from time to time. And then I'll take that to my Japanese Waterstones. I've got a 1000 and a 6000 grit joined stone here, and I've had that for years and I've just slowly been going through it, but it's still there. So until I eat right through to the center of that, I'll keep using this. Once you've got that bevel set, you don't need to take it through the full sharpening process here. You just want to make sure you have that correct angle to start with. Now we can start actually adding that camber to the tip of the blade. We're going to be trying to remove a fair bit of metal here. If you have a slow speed grinder that you're confident at using, you could potentially take off those corners on that, but depending on the effect that you're trying to achieve, you don't really need to take off very much metal. When most people are removing the outside corners on a plain blade, they're actually taking off a really minimal amount. Sometimes you could almost not even see it, because all they're trying to do is remove those sharp lines created by those outside corners. What I was trying to do was a little different because I really wanted to add a proper camber, which involved just removing a bit more material from those outside tips. The way that I did that was just using the Ezelap diamond plate. I did not take it to the grinder because I just thought it would be too aggressive, and the grinder I have is more for metal work, not really for truing up blades. So I took that material off using my Ezelap diamond stone. I started with the coarsest grit, removed some material, made sure that I've retained that angle of the bevel, same as on the front of the blade, and then I carried that through the entire sharpening process. Now, because we're curving this, it really comes down to setting that angle by hand, which is tricky, and it's something that I generally try and avoid with my blades because I found that over time I was not creating a consistent angle, which is why I now rely on the Veritas sharpening system. But with this, if you want that curve, you're going to have to do it by hand. Now, if all you're doing is just knocking off those sharp corners, you can probably just still rely on a angle setting system like this and then just knock off those corners by hand. But because I wanted to try and create a genuine curve, there's a bit more feel involved to it. So what I'm going to do is place the blade on the stone, bring the angle up until the tip of the blade is just touching, which means that angle is set as it was on my Veritas device, and then I'm going to take alternating passes, swinging out either way to take those corners off in a rounded fashion. Now, this can take a while, but you generally will only need to do it once, because once you've set that shape, all you're doing after that is just sharpening it. It's important to periodically check that you are following that angle, you're not creating a whole new bevel, and you've got to hold your body steady so that you are maintaining that angle the whole way along the front of the blade. If you're not sure where that cutting is happening, you can actually mark the tip of the blade with a permanent marker, and then you'll see where the metal is being removed. Once you've set that primary curve using the coarsest diamond plate that you have, then move up through the plates and then onto the actual Waterstone to get a really nice sharp edge using that same motion that you have been on the diamond stone. Now when you move to the Waterstone, obviously this process is going to remove material more unevenly than standard sharpening of one of these blades, because generally the standard sharpening process is almost affecting the whole stone evenly. This might mean that after you've sharpened one of these blades with a camber, you're going to have to true this stone up more aggressively with a diamond plate than you maybe normally would, because you are going to be moving more material. You'll want to continue to flatten the back of the plane as you move through this sharpening process, just as you would sharpening any other way. Once you've set that curve and carried it all the way through the sharpening process, we're going to put the blade back into the plane and see if we're getting the effect that we were looking for. I was able to achieve essentially what I was after. I've got a really nice smooth surface to the eye, but when I touch it, I can just feel ever so slight gentle waves. There's no straight lines. I am interested in experimenting with a much greater camber, but I need to make sure that the plane itself is finely tuned, not just the blade. And this thing needs a lot of work to get it to the point where it's operating at its peak performance. It really has been neglected for a long time, but it has created a really smooth surface that is so much more tactile than what you might get straight off a thicknesser. So I do think it's worth pursuing. Certainly taking the edges off a standard plane blade allows you to get a much smoother surface, and experimenting with that camber, you know, if you are looking for texture in your work, even if it is very subtle like this is, you know, it's worth giving a shot. I am by no means a master at using hand tools, so you're just kind of going through this journey with me. I'm just keeping busy in my workshop because this is where I feel calm and I can continue to make myself feel useful. I know a lot of you out there are, you know, at a loss for what to do, so get into the workshop and make something and it'll make you feel better. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe, and we'll have more stuff coming out for you. We'll try and do it every day.